My husband, James Scott, never saw me as a person. I was an asset, a beautiful piece of his portfolio, the perfect wife to complement his million-dollar life. That night, as I watched him spin his new, younger acquisition across the dance floor, my hand instinctively went to my stomach, to the secret I'd been waiting for the perfect moment to share. He danced as if I wasn't there, as if our entire life was nothing. He didn't know that for me. This wasn't an ending. It was a countdown, and by morning, both his wife and his carefully constructed world would be gone. The crystal chandeliers of the Fairmont Chicago's Imperial Ballroom dripped light onto the city's elite. It was the annual Starlight Foundation Gala, the glittering apex of the philanthropic season, and I, Sharon Russ, was playing my part to perfection. My emerald silk gown, a custom piece by a designer James had approved of, clung to a body that held the most profound secret of my life. At 3 months pregnant, I was still a whisper of a new reality, a secret known only to me. James had always been a breathtaking dancer. It was one of the first things that had captivated me when we met at a university fundraiser a decade ago. Tonight, his bespoke tuxedo fit his athletic frame like a second skin as he led Rochelle Cherry through an intricate, passionate tango. Her crimson dress was a slash of defiance against the ballroom's muted elegance, a color chosen to be seen, to claim. They moved as one, a seamless, fiery entity, their bodies communicating a story of clandestine meetings and shared desires. They make quite the pair, don't they? A voice purred beside me. Melissa Vance, wife of one of James's junior partners, held her martini like a weapon. Her eyes, however, weren't on the dancing couple, but on me, searching for a crack in my composure. James has always appreciated a partner who can keep up, I replied, my voice a marvel of calm. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water, the bubbles fizzing on my tongue, a stark contrast to the acid churning in my gut. For 6 months, I had known. It started with the scent of a perfume that wasn't mine, clinging to his shirts, the late nights at the office that stretched into sunrises, the financial statements I, with my forgotten degree in architecture and a mind for detail, had started to scrutinize. Rochelle wasn't just a symptom of a failing marriage. She was a strategic acquisition. As a junior analyst at a rival firm, her access to information was almost as appealing to James as her youth. He saw me then, his eyes flickering in my direction for a split second, across the crowded floor. There was no guilt in his gaze, only a brief, almost imperceptible annoyance, as if my presence were a minor inconvenience he had to manage. He spun Rochelle, her laughter echoing, and in that moment, I wasn't his wife. I was an audience member he had forgotten to dismiss. The weight of the platinum wedding band on my finger felt impossibly heavy, a shackle to a life that had slowly suffocated me. He had convinced me to put my own architectural firm on hold. "Just for a few years, Sharon," he'd said, his voice smooth as honey. "Until Scott Capital is stable. Then we'll build your dream." The years had passed. Scott Capital had become a titan in the private equity world, and my blueprints gathered dust in a forgotten corner of our Lincoln Park brownstone. My dream had become my little hobby. I moved through the throng of bodies, the murmur of conversations about stock options and summering in the Hamptons fading into a dull roar. I found myself at a small, unoccupied cocktail table near the edge of the dance floor. The orchestra transitioned to a slower, more intimate melody. James pulled Rochelle closer, his hand splayed possessively on the small of her back. Her head rested on his shoulder, their faces so close they were breathing the same air. This was the moment. The one I had rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times. The point of no return. I slipped the ring from my finger. The metal was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the heat of my resolve. It was a beautiful ring, a flawless 5-carat diamond James had presented as a symbol of his unwavering commitment. It was, I now knew, just another investment, designed to appreciate in value and secure my compliance. I walked to the edge of the dance floor, directly in their line of sight as they turned. James's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his perfectly composed features. Rochelle's triumphant smile faltered as she saw me approach. "Sharon," James said, his voice low and laced with warning. "What are you doing?" "I was just admiring the performance," I said, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the music. "It's quite a show." I stepped past them, to the table where they had left their champagne flutes. With a soft, deliberate click that seemed to silence the entire ballroom, I placed my wedding ring on the polished wood beside his glass. "Keep dancing, James," I said quietly, my gaze meeting his. For the first time in a long time, I felt no fear, only a vast, liberating emptiness. My hand drifted down, resting for a fleeting moment on the gentle curve of my belly. "You won't even notice I'm gone." I turned before he could form a response, before his mind could process the public defiance, the sheer audacity of my act. I walked, not ran, through the parting sea of onlookers, my spine straight, my head held high. Behind me, I could feel the ripple of chaos, the first tremor in the earthquake that was about to shatter James Scott's perfect world. He wouldn't catch me. By the time he untangled himself from his mistress and his pride, I would be a ghost, on my way to a future I had meticulously designed without him. A future for two. The sleek, anonymous black sedan idled at the East Service entrance of the Fairmont, just as promised. The man behind the wheel, Daniel Wilson, didn't look at me as I slid into the passenger seat. His focus was on the rear-view mirror, his expression a mask of calm concentration. Daniel and I had been friends since college, long before James had entered my life. He was a cybersecurity analyst, a man who saw the world in patterns and back doors, and the only person who knew the full truth of my gilded cage. "You did it," he said, his voice low as he pulled away from the curb, merging smoothly into the river of Chicago traffic. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than I've been in a decade," I whispered, the adrenaline of the last 10 minutes beginning to recede, leaving a hollow, vibrating space in its wake. I resisted the urge to look back. The glittering hotel, the life it represented. It didn't deserve a final glance. Daniel's friendship was one of the few things James had never managed to acquire or diminish. He'd tried, of course, referring to Daniel as my tech nerd friend, with a dismissive wave of his hand. But Daniel had seen through James from the beginning. "He doesn't look at you," Daniel had told me once, years ago, after a dinner party. "He looks past you, at what you reflect back on him." I had been offended then. Now the accuracy of his assessment was a chilling comfort. The car hummed along Lakeshore Drive, the city's skyline a breathtaking panorama of light and steel. It was the city where I'd dreamed of building, of leaving my mark with structures of glass and concrete. Now, I was leaving it behind, a fugitive from my own life. "He's going to call," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "He's probably blowing up your phone right now." I reached into my clutch, pulled out the rose-gold iPhone James had given me for my birthday, and powered it off without a second thought. "Let him. By morning, this number won't exist." The memory surfaced. Unbidden? It was our 2nd anniversary. We were in our half-furnished Lincoln Park brownstone, surrounded by moving boxes. I had just landed my first major independent contract, a renovation project for a historic downtown library. I was ecstatic, spreading the blueprints across our new dining table, my voice alive with passion as I explained my vision for the space. James had listened for about 3 minutes, a polite, vacant smile on his face. Then he'd gently rolled up my blueprints. "That's wonderful, honey. A great little hobby to keep you busy," he'd said. "Now, about the fundraiser for the alderman next month. I need you to chair the planning committee. It's crucial for the Scott capital expansion." I remembered the air leaving my lungs, the way my excitement had withered under the weight of his casual dismissal. A hobby. All my years of education, my passion, my talent, reduced to a hobby. That was the first time I realized our partnership wasn't a collaboration, it was a corporation, with him as CEO and me as the beautifully decorated, unpaid head of hospitality. The compromises began there, small at first, then consuming. I put my firm on hold. I chaired his committees. I hosted his clients. I curated our life to be a flawless backdrop for his ambition. I had become the architect of my own prison. "We're heading north," Daniel said, pulling me from the memory. "The cabin in Wisconsin is ready. You'll be safe there for a few days while we initiate the next phase." "And the package?" I asked, my voice tight. "In the glove compartment, new ID, new phone, and the access keys to the accounts." I opened it. Inside was a driver's license for an Anna Cole. The woman in the photo was me, but not me. Her hair was a honey blonde, her expression neutral and unreadable. There was a debit card for a bank in Zurich and a sleek, encrypted smartphone. Anna Cole. It felt strange on my tongue, the name of a stranger who was about to become my salvation. "He'll assume you went to your parents' place in Naples," Daniel said, correctly predicting James's linear, arrogant thinking. "Or that you're hiding out at a spa. He won't think to look for you in a rustic cabin 3 states away. He thinks you're incapable of surviving without a 5-star hotel." He was right. James's perception of me was his greatest weakness and my greatest advantage. He saw a fragile, decorative wife. He was about to meet the woman he had buried beneath years of neglect and condescension. As we crossed the state line, the city lights giving way to the profound darkness of the countryside, I thought of the ultrasound photo hidden in my wallet. A tiny, flickering bean of life. James knew nothing about it. I had planned to tell him tonight, a desperate, final attempt to see if there was any humanity left in the man I had married. His dance with Rochelle had been the brutal answer. This wasn't just an escape anymore. It was a rescue mission. I was saving not just myself, but the child who deserved to be born into a world free of its father's suffocating shadow. The ghost of Sharon Russ was fading with every mile we drove, and in her place, Anna Cole was beginning to take shape, forged in betrayal and fueled by a mother's fierce, unyielding love. The cabin was nestled deep within Wisconsin's Northwoods, a rustic A-frame structure that smelled of pine and wood smoke. It was owned by a shell corporation Daniel had set up years ago, a digital fortress with a physical address. Inside, a fire was already crackling in the stone hearth. It was simple, warm, and more of a home than the meticulously curated brownstone I'd left behind. "Your go-bag is in the bedroom," Daniel said, placing a laptop on the heavy wooden coffee table. "Essentials are packed. The rest of your things, we'll have to consider them casualties of war." I thought of my architectural books, my drafting table, the half-finished clay models of buildings that would never be built. They weren't just things. They were pieces of a self I had allowed to be amputated. "It's fine," I said, my voice betraying a small tremor. "They belonged to a different person." Daniel opened the laptop. "Okay, phase 2. The offshore account is active. The first transfer cleared an hour ago. Exactly 50% of all legitimate, liquid joint assets. No more. No less. For months, with the secret help of a forensic accountant Daniel had vetted, I had been tracing the labyrinth of our finances. I meticulously separated the money we had earned and saved together from the shadowy investments and private accounts James had created without my knowledge. I was taking only what was legally mine. The rest, the evidence of his deception, was my insurance policy. The dead man's switch is armed, Daniel continued, his fingers flying across the keyboard. It was his idea. A secure cloud server held copies of every incriminating document I had found. If I didn't log in with a specific code every 72 hours, the entire package would be automatically sent to the board of Scott Capital, the SEC, and the top financial journalist at the Chicago Tribune. It was a digital sword of Damocles hanging over James's head. I sank onto the worn leather sofa, the warmth of the fire a welcome comfort. The adrenaline had completely worn off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Now that the escape was real, the enormity of what I had done, and what had been done to me, crashed down. The affair with Rochelle was the most visible betrayal, but it wasn't the wound that had severed us. The true killing blow had come 3 months ago. James was supposedly at a partner's retreat in Aspen. I was searching his home office for some old tax documents when my hand brushed against a loose floorboard beneath his desk. My architect's eye had always noted it was slightly misaligned. Curiosity piqued. I pried it open. Inside was a leather folio. It didn't contain stock certificates or secret love letters. It contained mortgage documents. A second mortgage, to be precise, for $2.5 million, taken out against our fully paid-off Lincoln Park home. My signature was on every page, a flawless, undeniable forgery. The notary was a junior associate at his firm. I remembered staring at the papers, my vision blurring. He hadn't just been cheating on me. He had stolen our foundation, the one tangible asset that was supposed to be our shared future. The money had been wired to an account I couldn't access, an account tied to an LLC I had never heard of. When I confronted him, he had laughed it off. "It's a temporary liquidity solution, Sharon. A brilliant investment for the firm. The returns will be astronomical. You have to trust me. Trust me." The 2 words he had used to dismantle my life, piece by piece. Trust me when I said you should put your career on hold. Trust me when I said we should use your inheritance for the down payment on the house. Trust me when I said there was nothing going on with Rochelle. That was the moment love died. Not in a fiery explosion, but in the cold, silent vacuum of discovery. The planning for my exit began the next day. The affair was just noise. The forged signature was the declaration of war. "Sharon?" Daniel's voice was gentle, pulling me from the darkness of the memory. "You're thinking about it, aren't you? The house." I nodded, unable to speak. "What he did was more than just criminal," he said, his gaze steady. "He looked at the home you built together, the future you were planning, and he leveraged it like any other asset on his balance sheet. You included. He was right. In James's world, everything and everyone had a price. He'd calculated my value and decided I was worth less than a high-risk investment. He had failed to account for one thing. I was no longer willing to be undervalued. I took the new phone from the table, its surface cool and unfamiliar. On the screen, Daniel had installed a private banking app. I logged in, and there it was. A balance that represented not just money, but freedom. A future. Enough to start over. Somewhere far away. Somewhere Anna Cole could build something new. Not just for herself, but for the tiny life growing inside her. "Thank you, Daniel," I said, the words feeling utterly inadequate. I couldn't have... I know, he interrupted softly. You would have done the same for me. Now get some sleep. The real work begins tomorrow. As I lay in the cabin's small guest room, listening to the wind sighing through the pines, I felt the first flutter in my womb. A tiny, reassuring pulse. It was a promise. I wasn't just running away from a man. I was running toward a future, and for the first time in a very long time, I would be its sole architect. I woke to the insistent buzz of the encrypted phone. The digital clock read 7:12 a.m. Sunlight streamed through the cabin window, painting stripes across the wooden floor. It was Daniel. His voice was grim, stripped of its usual calm. He's moving faster than we anticipated. He's already called the police. I sat up, my heart starting a frantic rhythm against my ribs. They'll make him wait 24 hours. An adult has the right to leave. Normally, yes, Daniel said. But James Scott isn't a normal person. He donated $500,000 to the police chief's re-election campaign last year. They're treating it as a priority, high-risk missing person case. He's playing the concerned husband card, and he's playing it hard. A chill snaked down my spine. I had underestimated his brazenness, his ability to manipulate the very systems meant to protect people. I moved to the living room, where the small television was tuned to a 24-hour news channel. And there he was. James stood on the steps of our brownstone, his face a mask of carefully crafted anguish. Rochelle was nowhere in sight. He wore a somber grey suit, his expression grave as he spoke to a scrum of reporters. "I'm begging for my wife's safe return," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sharon has been under immense stress lately. She hasn't been herself. I fear she may be disoriented, confused. If anyone has seen her, please contact the authorities immediately. We just want her home safe. Stress. Disoriented. Confused." The words were poison darts, designed to discredit me before I could even speak. He was building his narrative. I wasn't a woman who had escaped a toxic marriage. I was an unstable wife who had suffered a mental breakdown. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. Standard playbook. Daniel's voice crackled over the phone. If he can't be the hero, he'll be the victim. It gets worse. He's offering a $50,000 reward. $50,000. That was enough to turn every gas station attendant, motel clerk, and nosy neighbor between Chicago and the coast into a potential informant. The safety of my anonymity was evaporating with every word he spoke. "They're triangulating your old phone's last location to the Fairmont," Daniel continued. "They'll be pulling surveillance footage from the entire area. My car will be on it. You need to get rid of it," I said instantly. Already on it. Meeting a contact in Milwaukee who specializes in making vehicles disappear. "But this accelerates everything, Sharon. You need to be transformed, and on the road by noon." I looked at my reflection in the dark television screen. The dark brown hair, the familiar shape of my face. It was the face of a missing person. It was a liability. In the bathroom, the supplies Daniel had packed were laid out like a surgeon's tools. Boxes of honey blonde hair dye, colored contacts, makeup palettes designed for contouring, for changing the very structure of one's face. The physical transformation from Sharon to Anna had to happen now, and it had to be perfect. As the acrid smell of the hair dye filled the small room, I thought about James's performance. He was a master manipulator, not just of finances, but of people. He had manipulated me for years, convincing me my own ambitions were small and frivolous compared to his grand vision. Now he was doing it to the entire city. My old life felt like a distant country. The woman who hosted elegant dinner parties and selected fabric swatches seemed like a stranger. That woman would have been terrified. She would have been broken by James's public betrayal. But Anna Cole wasn't broken. She was focused. As I washed the dark dye from my hair, watching it swirl down the drain like remnants of a past life, the encrypted phone buzzed again. It was a news alert from a local business journal that Daniel had forwarded. The headline read, "Scott Capital announces major European expansion. London office to open Q4. I froze, water dripping from my newly blonde hair onto the floor. The article detailed James's ambitious plan to launch a new headquarters in London. It quoted him extensively about his vision for global market dominance. The article was dated 2 days ago, the day before the gala. He had been planning a move. A massive, life-altering move to another continent. And he had never said a single word to me. My mind raced, connecting the dots. The second mortgage, the mysterious LLC, the drained accounts. It wasn't just a liquidity solution for his firm. He was funding his own escape, an escape that clearly didn't include me. Then Daniel sent a second link, this one from a high-end international real estate blog. The headline was a punch to the gut. Knightsbridge penthouse sells for $8.5 million to US financier. The article featured a photo. It was of James, beaming, standing on the balcony of a stunning glass-walled apartment with a panoramic view of Hyde Park. And standing next to him, her hand linked through his arm, was Rochelle Cherry. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. All this time, I had been meticulously planning my escape from him, believing I was one step ahead. But he had been planning his own exit all along. A new firm, a new continent, a new life with a new woman. I hadn't just been betrayed. I had been slated for abandonment. My disappearance hadn't ruined his plans. It had merely been an inconvenient, premature start to them. A strange, cold fury settled over me, displacing the fear. This changed everything. My plan was no longer about just disappearing and starting over. It was about survival against a man who would have left his pregnant wife with nothing but a mountain of debt and a forged signature. I looked at the emerging blonde woman in the mirror. Her eyes were still Sharon's, but they held a new, hard light. "Daniel," I said into the phone, my voice devoid of any tremor. "Change of plans. I'm not hiding in the Midwest. Book me a ticket. I'm going to London. If James Scott wanted to build a new empire, I would be there to watch it burn." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the phone. "London?" Daniel finally said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and dawning respect. "Sharon, that's the heart of his new operation. It's the last place you should be." "No," I countered, my voice hardening with newfound conviction. "It's the only place I can be. He'll be looking for a distraught, broken woman hiding in a small town in America. No one will be looking for a confident, successful architectural consultant setting up a new practice in the UK. They'll be looking for Sharon Russ. They won't even see Anna Cole." My mind was racing, the architect within me seeing the structural flaws in James's grand design. He was arrogant. He believed he had outsmarted everyone, especially me. His arrogance was the weakness I could exploit. Hiding was a defensive move. Going to London was an offensive one. "This is insane," Daniel breathed. "But it's also brilliant. It's a classic misdirection. But getting you there, a commercial flight, is impossible. Your face, even changed, is too much of a risk. The TSA, facial recognition, James will have put you on every watch list he can." "Then we find another way," I said, already toweling my blonde hair dry. The transformation was startling. The lighter hair color changed the entire tone of my skin, the shade of my eyes. I was already becoming someone else. "There's a network," Daniel said after a long pause. People I know through my work. Not criminals. Specialists. They help people disappear. Journalists in danger. Witnesses. People like you. It's deep. It's underground. And it's expensive. But they can get you to London without a paper trail. Use it, I said without hesitation. The money in the Zurich account was for this. It was for survival. While Daniel made the call, I finished my transformation. The hazel-colored contacts went in, turning my dark brown eyes into a warm, ambiguous shade. I used the contouring makeup, subtly altering the perceived shape of my cheekbones and jawline. I dressed in the simple, practical clothes from the go bag, jeans, a cashmere sweater, comfortable boots. Nothing like the designer labels Catherine Elliott favored. When I looked in the mirror, the woman staring back was a stranger. Plausible. Unremarkable. Invisible. An hour later, Daniel called back. It's done. A woman will meet you in 2 hours. Her name is Marlene. She drives a beat-up Ford Transit van. Her company officially transports rare art pieces. You will be her cargo. She'll take you to a private airfield in rural Illinois. From there, a cargo plane to a staging point in Iceland, then another to a small airport outside of London. No passports, no commercial terminals. The efficiency was breathtaking. This was a world I never knew existed, operating in the shadows of the one James dominated. I have to go dark now, Sharon, Daniel said, his voice heavy. Once they identify my car from the Fairmont footage, they'll be all over me. They'll monitor my communications, my financials. I've prepared for it, but I can't risk leading them to you. From now on, you are Anna Cole. We can't speak directly again until this is over. The finality of his words hit me with unexpected force. Daniel was my lifeline. Now, the rope was being cut. How will I know you're okay? I asked, a knot of fear tightening in my chest. Every Friday I'll make a small anonymous donation to the World Wildlife Fund online. If you see the donation, you know I'm safe. If a week passes without it. He didn't need to finish. Be safe, Daniel. You too, Anna, he said, using the new name for the first time. The call ended. I stood in the silent cabin, completely and utterly alone. For a fleeting moment, the weight of it all threatened to crush me. I was a pregnant woman with a fake name, about to be smuggled across the Atlantic in a cargo plane, heading toward a confrontation with a powerful, ruthless man. I took a deep breath and placed a hand on my belly. The faint flutter I'd felt before was stronger now. A tiny flicker of life, reminding me what this was all about. This wasn't just my fight. It was ours. I packed the few remaining items into a simple backpack. I wiped down every surface in the cabin, erasing any trace of my presence. As I waited for Marlene, I powered up the new laptop and began my research. I wasn't just going to London to hide. I was going there to build. I searched for small, independent architectural firms, co-working spaces for creative professionals, industry networking events. I started building the foundation for Anna Cole's professional life before she even set foot in the city. James had erased Sharon Russ's career. He would never get the chance to touch Anna Cole's. He thought he was building a global empire. He had no idea a ghost was coming, a ghost who knew all his secrets and had nothing left to lose. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the game was moving to a new continent. The brown Ford Transit van that pulled up to the cabin looked exactly as Daniel had described, unassuming and slightly battered. The woman who stepped out was in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore a simple denim jacket and carried herself with an air of quiet authority. "Anna?" she asked, her voice low and direct. There were no pleasantries. "Yes," I replied. I'm Marlene. Let's go. We're on a tight schedule. The back of the van was surprisingly sophisticated. It was climate-controlled and fitted with secure harnesses and padded compartments. My backpack was stowed, and I was strapped into a small, concealed passenger seat. It was windowless and isolating, a moving vault designed to transport priceless objects. Today, that object was me. We drove for hours in silence. Marlene was a focused, methodical driver, her eyes constantly scanning the road and her mirrors. She was a professional, and her competence was a strange comfort in the disorienting darkness. "Daniel told me about your change of plans," she said eventually, her voice coming through a small intercom. "It's a bold move. Most people in your situation just run." "My husband left me with no other choice," I said. "Running isn't enough. Men like him, they don't just let go," Marlene observed. "They see people as possessions. When a possession is stolen, they'll burn down the world to get it back, not because they miss it, but because their pride can't handle the loss." Her words perfectly encapsulated James's mindset. His frantic search wasn't born of love or concern. It was a desperate attempt to regain control of a narrative that was slipping from his grasp. We arrived at a small private airfield in the middle of nowhere. The plane was a nondescript cargo jet. The pilot and co-pilot nodded at Marlene, but asked no questions. I was led aboard and secured in a small, pressurized compartment near the cockpit. It was rudimentary, but safe. As the plane took off, leaving the country I had once called home behind, the reality of my new life began to set in. I was no longer Sharon Russ. I was cargo. I was a secret. I was free. The journey was a blur of darkness, engine hum, and fitful sleep. When we finally landed, it was on another remote airstrip, this one surrounded by the stark, volcanic landscape of Iceland. A different team, equally professional and silent, transferred me to another plane. The second leg of the journey was shorter. When the cargo doors opened again, the air that greeted me was cool and damp. It smelled of rain and green earth. I was in England. Marlene was waiting for me. She drove us away from the airfield, this time in a modest sedan. We headed towards London, the urban sprawl gradually building around us. "We have a place for you," she said. "A corporate apartment in Islington, leased for 3 months under your new name. It's clean, secure, and private." The apartment was perfect. It was a modern, furnished one-bedroom in a quiet residential building. It was anonymous enough to be safe, yet located in a vibrant neighborhood where a single professional woman wouldn't stand out. "There's more," Marlene said, placing a slim leather portfolio on the small dining table. "Daniel laid the groundwork, but my network has built the structure. This is the complete identity package for Anna Cole." I opened it. The level of detail was staggering. Inside was a British driver's license, a national insurance card, and bank statements from a UK bank showing a modest but consistent financial history. There were degree certificates from the University of Manchester School of Architecture and a master's from a Swiss design institute whose records had conveniently been corrupted in a server fire a decade ago. The employment history was a work of art. It showed Anna Cole as a freelance consultant who had worked for several architectural firms that had since been acquired or gone bankrupt, making verification difficult, but not impossible. "Your digital footprint is already established," Marlene explained. "A LinkedIn profile, backdated professional correspondence, even a few social media accounts with high privacy settings. Enough to seem real to anyone who does a cursory search. But the most crucial part was the final document. It was a one-page summary of Anna Cole's professional specialty, consultant specializing in the integration of corporate cultures and physical workspaces during international mergers and acquisitions. I stared at it, the brilliance of the strategy clicking into place. James's new venture, Elliott and Associates, is planning to acquire several smaller British firms to establish their London presence, Marlene said, confirming my thoughts. They will need exactly the expertise that Anna Cole offers. You could be hired by one of those firms before the acquisition even happens. It gives you a legitimate reason to be inside their world. It was the ultimate Trojan horse. I wouldn't be an outsider trying to peer in. I would be an expert, invited inside the very walls of his new empire. There's one final step, Marlene said, her tone becoming more serious. The paperwork is one thing. Inhabiting the identity is another. You need to unlearn Sharon. Her posture, her vocal patterns, her deference. We have someone who can help. The next 3 days were a masterclass in psychological transformation. A woman named Dr. Alani Reed, a former behavioral analyst for MI6, worked with me. She was relentless. She corrected my posture. Sharon stands like she's apologizing for taking up space. Anna owns her ground. She retrained my speech. Sharon softens her opinions with qualifiers. Anna states her analysis with confidence. She even changed the way I made eye contact. It was exhausting. I was retraining muscle memory that had been reinforced for a decade. By the end of the 3rd day, I was mentally and physically drained. But I was also different. When I looked in the mirror, I saw Anna. Her gaze was direct. Her smile was genuine, not performative. Her confidence was earned, not borrowed. On the 4th day, Marlene brought me a tablet. "It's starting," she said. Daniel released the first package. The headline was from the Chicago Tribune. Scott Capital launches internal investigation into founder James Scott, following allegations of financial impropriety. The article, citing a confidential source, detailed the unauthorized second mortgage on the Lincoln Park property and raised questions about potential client fund mismanagement. James's carefully crafted image as the tragic victim was beginning to crack. The war had begun, and James had no idea his greatest adversary was already behind enemy lines, ready for the next move. Life in London settled into a quiet, purposeful rhythm. My flat in Islington became my sanctuary and my command centre. Mornings were for establishing Anna Cole's presence. I spent hours in cafes, a laptop open in front of me, drafting proposals and sending outreach emails to small and mid-sized architectural and design firms across the city. I wasn't just playing a role, I was actively building a legitimate business. My specialty, workspace integration during corporate mergers, was niche and in high demand in a city that was a global hub for finance and law. It was the perfect cover, leveraging my real expertise while providing a plausible reason for my interest in the very firms James was targeting for acquisition. Afternoons were for exploration. I walked for miles, learning the city's streets, from the leafy squares of Bloomsbury to the vibrant chaos of the South Bank. I sketched buildings in a small moleskin notebook, feeling a part of myself that had been dormant for a decade, slowly reawakening. In Chicago, I was Mrs. James Scott. Here, I was just Anna, a woman with a sketchbook and a future. The anonymity was intoxicating. I was careful. I paid for everything in cash or with the UK debit card. I varied my routines. I avoided the flashy, American-heavy districts like Mayfair and Knightsbridge, the places James and Rochelle would eventually frequent. I was a ghost, deliberately haunting the parts of the city they would never think to look. Every Friday, I checked the World Wildlife Fund's website, and every Friday, a new small donation would appear in the public ledger. Daniel is safe. The simple confirmation was a lifeline, a silent conversation across an ocean. 3 weeks after my arrival, the second wave of Daniel's attack hit. This time, the story was bigger. An investigative piece in the Wall Street Journal. The Missing Wife and the Missing Millions. Inside James Scott's Web of Deception. The article was a masterpiece. It methodically laid out the timeline of James's financial maneuvers, juxtaposing them against his public pleas for my return. It detailed the forged mortgage, the offshore LLC, and the Knightsbridge penthouse purchase. It didn't just suggest impropriety, it provided a roadmap of his fraud. Crucially, it included a quote from a handwriting expert who deemed the signature on the loan documents a highly skilled but definite forgery. The narrative collapsed overnight. James was no longer the grieving husband. He was the primary suspect in a story of greed and betrayal. The Chicago PD, facing public humiliation for being so easily manipulated, immediately reclassified my case, and the SEC officially launched a formal investigation into Scott Capital. I read the article from my small London flat, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. There was no triumph, no glee, only a cold, grim satisfaction. This was the inevitable consequence of his actions. I hadn't created his downfall. I had simply turned on the lights so the world could see the monster he had always been. My phone, the secure one Marlene had given me, buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The protocol was simple. If a message was legitimate, it would contain a specific 5-digit code. The code was there. The message was brief. He's distracted. The board is forcing him out. Rochelle is lawyering up. Now is the time to plant the seeds. It was time for Anna Cole to make her move. The next day, I attended a networking event for commercial design professionals in Shoreditch. I circulated, making conversation, discussing trends in sustainable office design. I was no longer the silent wife, standing by her husband's side. I was a professional, speaking with authority on a subject I loved. I targeted a conversation with the managing partner of a firm called Dalton and Finch, a respected historic British firm that I knew, from my research, was struggling financially and ripe for acquisition. I also knew it was at the top of James's target list. I introduced myself as Anna Cole. I spoke about my recent work in Switzerland, helping 2 merging banks integrate their workspaces without losing productivity. The partner, a man named Alistair Finch, was intrigued. That's precisely the challenge we may be facing, he admitted, his guard lowered after 2 glasses of wine. We're in talks about a potential partnership with a larger American entity. It's a delicate process, I said sympathetically. Merging corporate cultures is as much about architecture as it is about human resources. The physical space dictates how people interact, collaborate, and feel about the change. I gave him my card. Should you need an independent consultant to help navigate that transition, I'd be happy to have a conversation. He took the card, his expression thoughtful. Anna Cole, I'll keep this. It's very likely we'll be in touch. I walked home that night under the soft glow of London's streetlights. It was a gamble, a deliberate step into the path of the storm. But it felt right. James had built his empire on deception, on using people as pawns. I was using my intellect, my genuine skill, to build a new life. And if that life happened to give me a front-row seat to the implosion of his, it was a poetic justice I was willing to embrace. The calm was over. The storm was coming, and for the first time, I was ready to walk directly into it. The view from my office on the 22nd floor overlooked the sprawling, historic heart of London. A year ago, I had arrived as a ghost, a woman with a fake name and a secret. Today, Anna Cole was one of the most sought-after architectural consultants in the city. My firm, Cole Integration Strategies, had a waiting list of clients. I had built it from nothing, on merit and expertise alone. My hand rested on the swell of my belly. My son, due in 6 weeks, was a constant, comforting presence. He was my why, the reason for every risk I had taken. The alert on my screen was from the BBC. I clicked the link, my expression calm. American financier James Scott, sentenced to 7 to 10 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. I scanned the article. James had pleaded guilty. The evidence against him, originating from the documents I had gathered, had been overwhelming. Scott Capital was bankrupt, its assets seized and liquidated. His former partners had turned on him, eager to save themselves. The empire he had been so proud of was nothing but a pile of legal ash. A separate, smaller article mentioned Rochelle Cherry. She had testified against James in exchange for immunity. Her career was in ruins. The last she was seen, she was boarding a flight back to her hometown in Ohio, her face shielded from paparazzi. The Knightsbridge penthouse had been seized as a proceed of crime. The life she had grasped for had vanished as quickly as it appeared. My secure phone, used only for communicating with the network, vibrated. It was a message from Daniel. Our first direct communication in a year. Justice of a sort. The Lincoln Park house sold at auction today. The last link is severed. You're free, Anna. Completely. I looked out at the London skyline. Was I free? I had been free the moment I walked out of that ballroom. This was just the epilogue. The story was no longer about James. It was about me. The irony was not lost on me that my biggest client was the consortium that had acquired the remnants of Dalton and Finch, the very firm James had been trying to buy. I had been hired to oversee the complete redesign and cultural integration of their new London headquarters. I was, quite literally, building a new future on the ruins of his failed ambitions. There was a soft knock on my office door. My assistant, a bright young woman named Chloe, popped her head in. "Alistair Finch is here to see you." "Send him in," I said. Alistair, the former partner of Dalton and Finch, now a senior executive in the new entity, entered. He was a kind, steady man who had become a friend and mentor over the past year. "Anna," he said, his face etched with a strange sympathy. "Did you see the news about that American fellow, James Scott?" I kept my expression neutral. I saw the headline, a cautionary tale. "Indeed," Alistair said, shaking his head. "The reason I bring it up is, well, it's a bit odd. When we were in our initial buyout talks with his people a year ago, they mentioned his wife, an architect. Her name was Sharon Russ." He looked at me, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "They said she had vanished. A terrible tragedy." I just thought, what a strange coincidence. Both architects, both, well, you know. My heart gave a single hard thud against my ribs. But my voice was even. "The world is full of coincidences, Alistair. Now, about the plans for the 4th floor atrium." We moved on, the moment passing. But it was a stark reminder of how close the two worlds, Sharon's and Anna's, still were. The ghost of the past was always there, just beneath the surface. Later that evening, as I walked home through the gentle London drizzle, I thought about his words. A tragedy. The world saw Sharon Russ's disappearance as a tragedy, the sad end to a story of a troubled woman. They didn't know it was a birth. I stopped in front of a small, independent bookstore, the warm light spilling onto the wet pavement. In the window was a book titled Invisible Women: How Society Erases Female Contribution. A year ago, I was one of them. My contributions to our life, our home, our finances, all erased by James to fuel his own narrative. He had tried to make me invisible. So I became invisible. And in that invisibility, I found my power, I found my voice, I found my strength. I continued home, my hand on my belly, feeling the gentle kick of my son. He would be born here, in London. He would have a British passport. He would grow up knowing only Anna Cole, a woman who built things, a woman who was strong and independent. He would never know the shadow of James Scott. The story wasn't about revenge. I realized that now. Revenge was a fire that consumed everything. This was about reclamation. I had reclaimed my name, my career, my future, and the right to bring my child into a world of safety and integrity. James wasn't a monster I had slain. He was simply a structural weakness in my old life, a flawed foundation that I had to demolish before I could build something true and lasting. And I was, first and foremost, an architect. Sharon's journey from a silent, betrayed wife to the powerful architect of her own destiny shows that sometimes the greatest act of defiance isn't a loud declaration, but a quiet, meticulously planned disappearance. She didn't just escape her husband, she outmaneuvered him, reclaimed her identity, and built a new future on her own terms, proving that true freedom isn't about running away, but about strategically rebuilding. Her story is a powerful reminder that the quietest people often have the most resilient spirits. If this story of resilience, strategy, and ultimate redemption moved you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who appreciates a story of strength. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a tale of justice and transformation. What part of Anna's plan impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments below.